Right. Well, listen, thank you for staying. There's not a huge exodus for the door, which is a good thing. I've got 20 minutes and want to share with you some of the thinking that we have in IBM about the next generation of web security. When I presented at this conference last year, those of you who were here then may remember, it was actually my second day ever in India in my life. We're now a year down the road. As I said earlier, this is now my 9th trip to India within that space of time. And over that time, I have learnt a huge amount about fraud and cyber threat and financial crime threat in India. I still have an awful lot to learn, I have to say. So let me run through this really, really quickly in the interest of time and respecting other speakers who are coming after me as well. First and foremost, you will notice that this is not a standard IBM deck. If this were a standard IBM deck, the font would be significantly smaller, probably about 4-point font, and I would be reading every single thing from it. So I've learned from mistakes of my colleagues. So what I want to do is give you some context around cyber threat, where we think this is. I think it's a crossover battleground. Protection methodologies, use cases, and some considerations. Now, you can represent this any way you like as such, but effectively, enterprise fraud risk management is tightly interlocked. There is security and operational risk management. All of those facets, the nexus of those facets, is probably where cyber sits and where we need to focus. The panel spoke variously about silos, about the siloed nature of an organization. I spoke to that myself as well. And that probably, for me, is the single biggest threat. That's where the fraudsters, where the cyber criminals pick us off, effectively. So as I say, the crossover battleground. The word cyber, I mean, I can open my inbox in the morning and find any number of mails from organizations to whom I subscribe talking about cyber. There's a new paper out from Deloitte, which arrived in my inbox last night, about cyber threat. It is absolutely everywhere. But what I do see around the world, and I do have a worldwide role, not only do I spend a week every month in India working with my colleagues here and with our business partners who are represented here today, I have the privilege of actually picking up a lot of what goes on around the world as such and trying to collate that into some sort of meaningful sense where I can extrapolate best practice that can be shared, not in a dirigiste, not to actually direct you and tell you what you should be doing, but rather to advise and inform. But cyber certainly seems to cover a multitude of sins. It creates confusion. There is definitely a degree of ignorance around it, and that also creates an opportunity for the fraudsters to drive even bigger wedges between the silos. So I think a lot of this is around the demystification of the threat. There are very, very knowledgeable participants earlier on the session. Rajesh from Yes Bank, for example, talking passionately as a CISO around the threat and the means of providing solutions against that threat. But again, what came out was the fact that those solutions have to be monitored all the time. It's not fire and forget. The other thing is knowledge. Again, as I said, it's not just about the technology. Your guys in your organizations need to skill up. That is absolutely key. So the operational integration, for me, I think there is the requirement to actually work out some way of integrating the operations, your fraud operations from a risk perspective, card fraud, payments fraud, your compliance function with anti-money laundering, with financial crime, and also the cyber threat. And it's what I was talking about raising this up to an enterprise level. Now, I appreciate that that's probably easier said than done. The reality is that it is something, in my humble opinion, to which you should all aspire. There are means, there are technologies to be able to help you to do that. But first, again, the point was made again, is actually knowing, Vishal used the expression, and I don't think I've stolen it from him, so I must have heard it elsewhere, because KYE, that is what it's all about. Your customers can be your enemies, but know your enemy. It's absolutely clear. The other thing also, I'm working with one of the banks in the United Kingdom, where it's become very, very clear, and we're talking about a scale here which is nothing like some of the banks that are represented here today. I mean, it's minuscule in comparison. But this bank has probably 8 or 9 point solutions trying to address components of cyber threat, of online threat. But none of these components communicate with each other. So there is overlap, there's overlay, and there is the possibility of information dropping through the gaps. There is the danger of acquisition of point solutions where they address a need, there are very nice glossy brochures. It's important that those capabilities are made to communicate, where you can extrapolate data and then use that where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. The other thing also now is actually daring to ask. Again, the point was made that in 1990 capabilities were there, 2002 they didn't work. There are now questions that you as CISOs, as security professionals, as fraud and AML professionals in this room can ask, that 4 years ago and 5 years ago you didn't dare ask because you knew there were no answers. There are now answers to these questions. Again, not always technology, it is around sharing knowledge. And the fact that you've got now an organization within India that's actually going to be working along the lines of FSISAC in the United States, that's a huge step forward. That collaboration is absolutely key. This is, I don't expect you, I've left this in, I know all these charts are actually available to you afterwards, but basically just to point out in terms of methodologies. We have methodologies that are effectively infrastructure-centric, that are device-centric and data-centric. I won't go through all those at the moment, but this is just to actually identify that there will be components there around those methodologies with which you are familiar. There are some possibly that you are not familiar. Again, those can be developed in discussion with myself. I'm here for the afternoon. My colleagues here, Sarang, Anuj, and our business partners in Element Blue as well. But the cyber intelligence concept, again, this is in terms of showing this, and it shows far better. I was actually scared looking at this on here because I can't even see it on here, so I'm pleased it actually comes up here. But again, it's really talking about the concept of cyber intelligence. Intelligence is that outer sphere. It's actually the knowledge of what your lines of defense are against intelligence. Again, knowing what the threat is. How can you identify that threat? And then how can you deal with data breaches, with SCADA attacks? Again, over on the right-hand side there, again, I'm rushing through this to actually respect other speakers. It's absolutely important. If you took away nothing else from this, it's all around gathering intelligence on the threats. Understand what they are, or try to understand what they are. Sometimes you'll wrestle with it. But at the end of the day, you understand that they are perpetrated by people who may not even want to steal money from your organization. They've just got a point to prove. They may be disgruntled employees. Again, something of an eye chart as well. It is, after all, an IBM deck. But again, Vishal was talking about reconnaissance, about weaponization, around delivery. So on the left-hand side there, you actually got the components that actually talk to the external threat, and not dissimilarly, the cybersecurity, the internal threat on the right-hand side there. Recruitment, reconnaissance, acquisition, exfiltration. The internal threat is just as valid. The means of execution may be different. They may be actually slightly less sophisticated, but they are a threat nevertheless. As employers, we want to trust our employees. But at the same time, you will find that there are bad eggs in any given basket. Those threats are very, very similar. Again, understanding what the threat is, the nature of threat, will allow you to better actually counter it. The sweet spot for IBM, effectively, is in the continuum, in this continuum. So working around clockwise from the top right quadrant, prevention, discovery, investigation, and detection. What is key to that is investigation. For me, I came from an environment, I worked with detection and prevention solutions. Investigation was never in my world. It was all around the dynamics of real-time investigation, real-time prevention, real-time detection of threat. In terms of completing that continuum now, and this all changed on 9/11. It will have changed here also on 26/11. The importance here is the use of investigative capabilities to be able to understand that threat, to be able to visualize it. Again, I would make no apology for using a product name here. One of IBM's most inspired acquisitions in the past 5 years has been the acquisition of the I2 capabilities. Visualization, analysis, and investigation, which can be applied across the organization, ingesting data from multiple sources. And it's used by some of the banks here today. I would like to think, in fact, I would be very, very sure that were I to be invited to speak at this event next year, there will be a significant number, a greater number of you actually using that technology to very, very good effect. Just a few quick examples. Knowing the environment. Again, you will have a security infrastructure in place. You'll know what business schedules are. You'll know about physical access. You'll have logs. You'll have an SIEM capability, remote access. The idea here is to build up that whole picture approach. Again, the word holistic was used earlier in the panel discussion. It's an overworked word, an overused word, but it absolutely describes what you need to do. Again, take those disparate forms of data on the left and the right, take some of that through your SIEM from the left, and on the right side, your threat analysis, social media analysis, and feed that into something like I2 for social network analysis, entity analysis, with an output that allows you to better visualize that threat. Again, I won't go through that again. There's a lot of detail there. I leave that for your consideration. A lot of this you will know already, some of it you may not know, but please feel free to engage with us. Insider threat, not desperately dissimilar, but again, work schedules, phone logs, phone numbers, activity patterns, etc., access. Putting that into the whole picture, providing the overall view of that employee. What do you not know about the employee? I'd not heard about I hadn't come across the idea or the thought of sending spoof spam or spoof phishing mails to employees. I'm just wondering whether or not we as IBM should be thinking about that, because the threat that we have with 420,000 employees worldwide is not insignificant. So I will definitely take that back into my organization to see whether or not, A, we can do it. I mean, conceptually we could do it, but whether or not we're allowed to do it with all the multiplicity of jurisdictions in which we work. So again, knowing, having that knowledge, having that insight and information about your threat actors, identifying whether or not a trusted employee could potentially be a threat actor. So for planning, investigation helps in cyber scenario planning and attack tree analysis. Again, this is all about drawing in information from disparate sources. What I would say is, and what I know that my colleagues who are working in the cyber group within IBM, we are absolutely convinced that the majority of organizations have not planned effectively for a cybersecurity incident. There is definitely a greater awareness, but there is still a huge component of rabbits in headlights. It's like, whoa, what do we do now? So again, there is way too much information out there. Unfortunately, you are being asked to sift through it. I do believe that, again, collaboration within the banking community can significantly help to reduce the fuzz, the noise, all of that, all of what is chaff. And again, dealing with some of your trusted suppliers, trusted vendors can also help you to do that as well, to help you to make the right decisions for your organizations. Key takeaways, again, know where, when, why, how, and by whom your network is being threatened. Very, very simple. Words are one syllable pretty much, well, most of them anyway. But that's what it comes down to. Taking that information, distilling it, and using technology, in this case, and knowledge that resides within your organization to identify that threat. We know that the cybersecurity market is large and growing at a it's not actually an impressive rate, it's a scary rate. We also know that cybersecurity is growing towards a proactive capability rather than just defensive. That has to be the case. We will invariably be one step behind the smart guys who are out there who've got nothing better to do than use their PhDs to hack into your systems. Again, take this away as such. Cybersecurity and intelligence is an ever-changing environment. Do not believe for a moment you can deploy capabilities, fire and forget. This requires constant surveillance, constant updating, constant knowledge improvement. Now, those of you that know IBM will know that you don't get much out of IBM for free. There are sites here which are free. Obviously, there's Twitter accounts. Trusteer, one of our acquisitions in terms of endpoint authentication, which was talked to a little bit earlier. We have the IBM security group, the X-Force document, which is now published free quarterly. That is actually a combination, it's the compilation of pretty much all of the security and cyber threats that are out there. You can download that from IBM.com, you can subscribe to it. Again, it's a great source of unbiased information. The other thing that I touch on just before I finish also, we have X-Force down there at the bottom. The other thing we've created within the last 3 months is Red Cell. Red Cell is a group of IBM employees now, cyber specialists who have worked for some of the security agencies, none of whom I would mention by name, but who are specialists in this field. We actually have ethical hackers working for us, for example. Red Cell will produce documentation and information along the lines of X-Force, but specifically related to cyber threat. Again, there will be announcements coming out in the press. I urge you to use that. Again, it will be free to all, free to download. Unfortunately, the criminals will be able to get hold of it as well, but we'll know when they download it as well. From an engagement perspective going forward, two of my colleagues here, Sarang Rajan down at the front there, Anuj Gupta, who arrived very late, having been there to cast his vote up in Delhi this morning, are both resident of India. I am based out of the United Kingdom. I have a worldwide role. My wife actually thinks I'm based at 37,000 feet because she doesn't see that much of me. But again, I am available to you as a worldwide resource and an operational specialist. With that, thank you very much indeed. If there are questions, I'll gladly take them. If not, I'm definitely around for the rest of the day.